The Big Tujunga Canyon UFO Abduction, 1953. The forgotten encounter that may have started America's alien abduction mystery. Long before the famous stories of Betty and Barney Hill, before Travis Walton, before the phrase alien abduction had entered popular culture, there was a forgotten encounter deep inside the mountains overlooking Los Angeles, an encounter that remained hidden for nearly 20 years. A story involving two women, a mysterious beam of light, humanoid beings, missing memories, and a secret that would only emerge under hypnosis decades later. What happened in Big Tujunga Canyon during the spring of 1953? Was it simply a vivid dream shared by two frightened women? Or was this America's first documented alien abduction? Tonight, we journey into one of the most mysterious and overlooked UFO cases in American history. You are watching Space, the final frontier above and beyond an open-minded channel. For your entertainment, we bring you a story of one of the earliest recorded alien abduction encounters in the United States. To understand this case, we first have to understand the location. Big Tujunga Canyon lies within the rugged San Gabriel Mountains just northeast of Los Angeles, California. Today, the canyon is crossed by winding roads and scattered homes, but in the early 1950s, it was a very different place. The area was remote, dark, wild. Miles of steep cliffs, dense chaparral, and isolated cabins created an environment where strange lights could easily go unnoticed by the outside world. Yet despite its isolation, Big Tujunga Canyon sat only a short drive from one of the world's fastest-growing cities. It was close enough to civilization, yet far enough away for something extraordinary to happen without witnesses. Over the decades, the canyon would become associated with dozens of reports involving mysterious lights, glowing spheres, disappearing craft, strange sounds, and even reports of silent helicopters that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Researchers later began calling the region a window area, a place where unexplained phenomena appeared to occur with unusual frequency. Whether coincidence or something more, Big Tujunga Canyon was quietly becoming one of California's strangest locations. Seeking a peaceful getaway from the growing bustle of Los Angeles, they had traveled into the rugged wilderness of Big Tujunga Canyon, an isolated stretch of the San Gabriel Mountains located only about 30 miles north of downtown. Although relatively close to one of America's largest cities, the canyon felt like another world entirely. Steep, rocky ridges, dense chaparral, towering oak trees, and miles of twisting dirt roads created a landscape where darkness ruled once the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The women rented a small cabin nestled deep within the canyon. Far removed from city lights, it was the perfect place to escape modern life. Nights in Big Tujunga were known for their profound stillness. There were no streetlights, no traffic, no aircraft passing overhead with any regularity. After sunset, the only sounds usually came from nature itself: the rustling of leaves in the breeze, the distant calls of owls, coyotes howling across the hillsides, and the endless chorus of crickets echoing through the valley. Researchers would later identify the women only by the pseudonyms Sarah Shaw and Jan Whitley, choosing to conceal their real identities in an effort to protect their privacy. Neither women had a history of seeking publicity, nor were they known to have any fascination with flying saucers or extraterrestrials. They were simply two ordinary people expecting nothing more extraordinary than a quiet evening in the mountains. As darkness settled over Big Tujunga Canyon, everything appeared perfectly normal. The stars filled the sky with remarkable clarity, untouched by the glow of city lights below. The cool mountain air drifted gently through the trees, and eventually both women retired for the night, unaware that they were about to become part of one of the earliest and most controversial alleged alien abduction cases in American history. Then, at approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, everything changed. Without warning, both women were abruptly awakened from their sleep. At first, neither understood what had disturbed them. Then they noticed the light. It wasn't simply shining through the cabin windows. It was flooding the entire room. An impossibly brilliant white glow poured through every crack and opening in the cabin, transforming the darkness into something resembling broad daylight. The intensity was unlike anything both women had ever witnessed. It seemed almost alive, bathing everything around them in a cold, luminous radiance. According to their later testimony, this was no ordinary light. It wasn't the sweeping beams of automobile headlights climbing a canyon road. It wasn't moonlight filtering through the trees. It wasn't lightning flashing across a storm-filled sky. There were no clouds, no thunder, no rain. Only an overwhelming white brilliance that appeared to envelop the entire canyon. The landscape outside seemed to disappear beneath the strange illumination, as though every rock, every tree, and every hillside had been washed in an unnatural glow. But perhaps even more unsettling than the light itself was the silence. The canyon, normally alive with the sounds of nighttime wildlife, had become unnaturally still. There was no wind moving through the branches, no chirping insects, no frogs, no owls, no distant coyotes. Even the familiar creaks and groans of the surrounding forest had vanished. It was as if nature itself had suddenly stopped. The silence was so complete, so absolute, that both women would later describe it as almost oppressive, as though the entire mountain had been frozen in time. For a few terrifying moments, the only thing that existed was the brilliant white light, and an overwhelming feeling that something impossible was waiting just outside the cabin. What happened next would remain buried in their memories for almost 20 years. The women remembered looking toward the light, and then, nothing. The night seemed to vanish. When they later recalled fragments under hypnosis, they described events that sounded almost unbelievable. Sarah reported feeling as though she had left the cabin without walking. She remembered floating. She would later describe the sensation as if someone, or something, was guiding her effortlessly through the air. According to her hypnotic recollections, she wasn't walking. Her feet never touched the ground. Instead, she appeared to be suspended inside a beam of light, pulled silently upward toward an enormous object hovering nearby. Sarah later recalled finding herself inside a room unlike anything she had ever imagined. The transition from the brilliant light outside to the interior of the craft seemed almost instantaneous. She could not remember passing through a doorway or climbing aboard. One moment she was moving toward the glowing object, and the next she was standing inside what appeared to be an enormous circular chamber. The room was brightly illuminated, yet there were no visible light fixtures. No lamps hung from the ceiling. No bulbs lined the walls. Instead, a soft white glow seemed to radiate from every surface at once. The light was gentle and evenly distributed, producing no harsh shadows and making it impossible to determine its source. Everything around her appeared perfectly visible, yet nothing was glaring or uncomfortable to look at. The atmosphere felt strangely peaceful, but also unnervingly sterile. The air carried no noticeable smell. There was no sound of engines, electrical equipment, or machinery. There were no vibrations beneath her feet, no humming motors, no rushing air. Despite being inside what she believed was a flying craft, the environment was almost unnaturally quiet. Every surface appeared smooth and seamless. The walls curved gracefully upward into the ceiling without a single visible joint or corner. There were no rivets, screws, welds, or support beams like those found inside conventional aircraft. The material itself had an unusual appearance, metallic, yet unlike any metal she recognized. It possessed a soft, pearlescent sheen that reflected the light in subtle ways as she moved, almost as though the walls themselves were alive. The floor was equally flawless. There were no carpets, tiles, or visible panels. Everything appeared to have been formed as one continuous structure, giving the impression that the room had been molded rather than assembled. As Sarah looked around, she searched instinctively for something familiar. Where was the cockpit? Where were the controls? She saw nothing that resembled the interior of any airplane or helicopter of the early 1950s. There were no switches, no dials, no gauges, no levers, no steering mechanisms, no computer screens, nothing that suggested how the craft was operated. The technology seemed completely beyond her understanding, as if the vehicle functioned through principles entirely unknown to modern science. Then she noticed she was not alone. Standing several feet away were a number of strange beings silently observing her. According to her hypnotically recovered memories, there appeared to be between 3 and 5 of them. They were unmistakably humanoid in form, yet unlike any human she had ever encountered. The beings were exceptionally tall, perhaps 6.5 to 7 feet in height, with remarkably slender bodies. Their arms were unusually long, hanging almost to their knees, while their shoulders were narrow and their movements smooth and deliberate. Every motion appeared graceful, almost effortless, as though they required very little physical exertion. Their skin was pale gray with a faint ivory tone, smooth and completely hairless. Under the soft illumination of the room, it almost seemed to shimmer with a subtle reflective quality. But it was their faces that left the deepest impression. Sarah described them as elongated and expressionless, resembling perfectly crafted masks more than human faces. Their heads appeared slightly larger than normal, tapering gently toward the chin. Large almond-shaped eyes dominated their features, dark in color and set at a slight angle. Their noses were little more than small ridges, while their mouths were thin, almost invisible lines that never appeared to move. There was no visible emotion. No smile, no frown, no anger, no curiosity, only an unwavering, unreadable gaze. Despite their unusual appearance, the beings did not seem hostile. They stood calmly around her, watching in complete silence. Sarah would later say that although she should have been terrified, she felt strangely calm, as if her fear had somehow been suppressed. It was almost as though the beings possessed the ability to influence her emotions, replacing panic with an overwhelming sense of quiet acceptance. In the decades that followed, UFO researchers would note that Sarah's description shared remarkable similarities with hundreds of later reported alien abduction accounts. Witnesses from around the world would independently describe seamless metallic interiors, indirect lighting, silent technology, and tall, slender humanoids with large, dark eyes. Whether these similarities point to a genuine phenomenon, the influence of shared cultural imagery, or something else entirely, remains one of the greatest mysteries surrounding the UFO phenomenon. Yet for Sarah, the memory of that silent, glowing room and the emotionless beings who stood waiting within it would remain one of the most unforgettable experiences of her life. She later said she did not feel overwhelming fear. Instead, she experienced an odd sensation of calm, as though her emotions were somehow being controlled. Sarah claimed the beings placed her on what appeared to be a table. A device unlike anything she had ever seen was passed over her body. She described it as some form of scanning instrument. It produced no pain, no cutting, no injections, only an intense feeling of warmth and vibration. Many decades later, remarkably similar descriptions would appear in hundreds of reported alien abduction cases around the world. Medical examinations, body scanning, emotionless humanoid entities, and technology far beyond anything publicly known. Whether coincidence or something more, the similarities remain striking. One detail from Sarah's recollections has fascinated UFO researchers for decades. According to her hypnosis sessions, one of the beings communicated with her, not through spoken words, but somehow directly into her mind. The being allegedly told her that she possessed the cure for cancer. No explanation followed, no scientific details, only the mysterious statement itself. Why such a message would be given, or whether it had any meaning at all, remains one of the great unanswered questions of the case. Sarah was not alone. The second woman, known publicly only as Jan Whitley, also remembered being taken aboard. Although fewer details were recovered from her memories, investigators believed both women described remarkably similar events. Two independent witnesses, sharing missing time, bright lights, humanoid entities, and an experience neither publicly discussed for years. Following the incident, life continued. Neither woman became famous. Neither sought publicity. The strange night slowly faded into fragmented memories. For nearly 2 decades, the event remained hidden. Then, during the 1970s, everything resurfaced. Interest in UFOs had exploded after the widely publicized Betty and Barney Hill case. Researchers began investigating earlier reports that shared similar characteristics. Sarah eventually underwent regressive hypnosis. The sessions were conducted by Dr. Martin Reiser, founder of the LAPD's Behavioral Science Services, and later by psychologist Dr. Bill McCall. Under hypnosis, Sarah described floating through the air toward a brilliant object. At one point, she stated, "They're walking with me, but my feet aren't on the ground." She continued describing the interior of the craft, the strange beings, and the medical examination. These hypnosis sessions transformed an almost forgotten incident into one of the earliest alleged alien abduction cases in American history. The Big Tujunga incident was not isolated. Researchers Ann Druffel and D. Scott Rogo spent years documenting unusual reports from the region. Together, they referred to the phenomenon as the Tujunga Canyon contacts. Residents reported mysterious glowing spheres drifting silently through the mountains. Others described phantom helicopters flying without rotors or engines. Some claimed to chase glowing craft that simply vanished into solid hillsides. Still others reported strange beings appearing briefly before disappearing into the darkness. Individually, each report could be dismissed. Collectively, they painted an unsettling picture. Why did so many unusual experiences occur within this relatively small section of Southern California? No one knows, whether one believes the story or not. The Big Tujunga Canyon incident occupies an important place in UFO history. It predates nearly every famous alien abduction case that followed. It contains many of the same reported elements that would later become hallmarks of the abduction phenomenon. Brilliant lights, missing time, floating into a craft, humanoid beings, medical examinations, telepathic communication. If the event truly occurred, they represent one of the earliest documented examples of what would later become a worldwide phenomenon. More than 70 years have passed since that mysterious night in Big Tujunga Canyon. The isolated cabin is long gone. The witnesses have faded into history. No definitive answers have ever emerged. Yet the questions remain. What produced the brilliant light that illuminated the canyon? Why did two women describe such remarkably similar experiences? Was it an elaborate illusion? A psychological mystery? A forgotten government experiment? Or something not of this earth? And why is it that their abduction encounter and testimony are so similar to many other abduction cases? Perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether they were taken, but whether the truth has been hidden in plain sight all along. Because sometimes, the oldest stories are the ones we've forgotten, and sometimes, the greatest mysteries begin in the silence of a lonely canyon at 2 o'clock in the morning. Thank you for watching Space, the final frontier above and beyond. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next time we venture into the beyond.